So continuing on with the TMCC Library Open Genealogy Lab Outstanding Guest Speaker Series, today we are pleased to present Jake Magnum. Jake has been the Project Development Librarian for the University of North Texas Library's portal to Texas history since February of 2015. In his position, he works as a liaison between cultural heritage institutions in the creation and digitization collections and the portal to Texas history. An additional function of his role at the UNT libraries, he performs outreach to various organizations and associations. These include genealogical societies, museums, libraries, and private collectors. On a more personal note, he's the proud father of two amazing girls, 11 and 7 years old. And before they were born, he enjoyed reading, drawing, and painting. Since they were born, he enjoys the occasional warm meal and even the rare clean house. I'm sure we could all relate to that. The Portal to Texas History is a digital repository for historical and cultural heritage materials. The materials hosted on the portal are the product of collaboration between the University of North Texas Libraries and the portal partners, which include genealogical societies, museums, libraries, government agencies, and private collectors. The presentation today will provide users with an overview of the portal to the Texas history, how one could use it for their own research interest, and highlight some of the various collections on the portal. So with that, I would like to extend a warm virtual welcome to Jake. Thank you, Jake.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate everyone taking the time out of their days to come and listen to me talk for a little bit. It's still kind of a weird feeling to know that people are coming to hear me speak about anything. I've been doing this for 5 years, like I said, but it doesn't get less odd for me in that regard. Real quick, before I kind of move on to other stuff, I have started sharing my screen. I want to make sure that everyone can see it real quick. Excellent. So, like Sue said, my name is Jake Mangum, and I am the Project Development Librarian for the Portal to Texas History. The portal is a digital repository for cultural heritage and historic materials from across the state. We have worked with over 400 partners to digitize a wide variety of materials and make them freely available online. Before I really get into the whole presentation, I want to give you all some background into the portal and let you know kind of how it all began. In 2002, the then Associate Dean of the libraries was interested in preserving the history for small communities that was running the risk of being lost, either because of people leaving those communities for larger communities or being absorbed by those larger communities. And so by 2004, we had an online presence with 6 collaborative partners. And I want to say, what was it? We just saw this number the other day. We had about 8,000 digital items hosting on the portal to Texas history. Since then, we now have 436 collaborative partners, about 1.57 million visible digital objects, which comes out to about 14 million files, individual files. And when you think about how this number goes from 1.57 million items to 14 million files, if you think of it like a book, our goal is to create a digital surrogate for a physical item. So we scan from the front cover, inside of the front cover, all the book, inside of the back cover and the back cover, so that you have the entire item there, essentially. So that's how we get to over 14 million files. And we're on average adding about 10,000 items each month. So I get a lot of people asking when I give this sort of presentation other times, how do we get 10,000 items added each month? And I have a theory on this that I share. And essentially what it is we provide every student who does our digitization 2 monitors. So one, they can look at the item that they're digitizing, and on the other screen, they can watch YouTube or cat videos or something along those lines. And while they're focusing on these 2 different screens, we sneak up behind them and tie them to the chairs. Not really, but it's a great theory. I would love to keep some of the students longer, but truth be told, since we are also a university, we want them to graduate and we want them to do well in life outside. Last year, we actually added about 368,000 items, so well above the 10,000 items added each month. And we have about 1 million users each month. So the breakdown of that 1.57 million items, there are 36 different resource types, but here's a quick overview of that. There are 393,737 photographs, 714,513 newspaper issues, and that's issues, so there's actually close to almost 8 million pages of just newspapers on the portal. 6,069 books, 83,000 maps, 15,000 legislative documents. Now, all of our print materials are full text searchable, so if someone is looking for a specific name or a specific event, they can type that into the search engine and it'll pull up all the print instances we have of that. We have, like I said, 36 different resource types, and some of the others of note that I think should be mentioned are we have scrapbooks, probate records, family records and letters, Gamel's Law of Texas and other state documents. Gamel I will actually go into in a little bit because he's kind of an interesting guy. We have genealogy publications, yearbooks, and other serials, as well as course curriculum that's available. So if you aren't familiar with the portal to Texas history, and seeing as I'm speaking to people from all over the country, it's entirely possible that you're not familiar with us. This is essentially what our website looks like. If you go to texashistory.unt.edu, I'll say that again, it's texashistory.unt.edu, you'll end up with a screen similar to this. Sue, while I'm thinking about it, if there are questions in the chat, I can't see those right now, but if anyone does have questions, please feel free to throw those into the chat or unmute yourself and ask a question. I don't mind someone asking questions in the moment, but if Sue, if you'll look for the chat questions and just chime in if there are any that show up, I'm happy to pause and answer at that moment. All right, so the portal to Texas history again, texashistory.unt.edu. Some of my favorite ways to explore the portal is just below the search bar is actually hitting the Explore By. And it'll bring up a long page similar to this. And one of my favorites is to choose location. Location, it will default, since we are the portal to Texas history, it will kind of default to Texas information first, but you will notice that there are 1,379 different counties, 141 countries, and it says 51 states because that includes the Samoa in the calculation of what is considered a state, even though technically it isn't a state. So when you click on location, it will default to the state of Texas, like I said, and it'll show a heat map on the side there, where the darker the color in the county, the more information we have pertaining to that particular county. So for example, if you look at North Texas, there are a couple of really dark squares, kind of where Dallas and Fort Worth are. There's darker squares or darker counties where Austin is, as well as Harris County. And we get materials from museums, libraries, archives, universities, publishers, private collectors, corporations, genealogical groups, historical societies, and commissions, as well as government agencies, to name a few. I will point out, when you on the heat map, if you move your mouse over the specific county in the heat map, it will show how many items we have that pertain to that specific county. Somewhere in that county is mentioned in this record. So for this one has Johnson County with 3,970 items pertaining to somewhere within Johnson County. You are also able to search by media. One of the interesting things that the portal to Texas history does versus a lot of other databases and even Google itself, you can't go to Google and just hit enter and pull up everything that they have. On the portal to Texas history, if you go to texashistory.unt.edu and just hit search, it will pull up all of the items that we have on the portal, and it will organize them by the most recently added items first. So if you're ever bored and just kind of curious as to what we have on the portal or what we've added since last time you happened to be on, you can hit search and it will pull up all of the most recent items first. There is also right next to the search button an any type. If you click on that, it will give you a drop-down menu of all the different resource types and a few combinations of resource types to narrow your searches right off the bat, so you don't have to look through absolutely everything. Inside of items, I will point out that all materials, all print materials, are full text searchable. So like I said, if you have a specific name or a specific event, you can type that in and it will pull up all the print instances of that. On the left-hand side of your screen, you can see I typed in the word mayor for this particular item. And once you hit enter or the search button, it will pull up the sequence that has that particular term in it. And you can click on zoom view and you'll see that it's highlighted. The highlight can be turned off. You can leave it on. It helps to really kind of orient you on the page pretty quickly, and you're able to zoom in, like I said, further on the item in the specific area, because some of the newspapers and some of the other documents that we have come to us in microfilm, and so they are just by nature very small, and you got to zoom in on it a little bit. So one of the things when I give a version of this presentation, like I said, fairly often, a few times a year. And one of the things I always like to incorporate into this is the types of partnerships that we've worked with and types of partners that we've worked with, because there's so many different interesting organizations that people aren't aware of, and I like to highlight some of them, as well as some of the collections in particular that we've worked with. There are a handful of slides in this slide deck that I want to make sure are I enjoy so much that I want them in pretty much every presentation I give, because it brings a smile to my face still after 5 years. And I figure if it's doing that to me after this long of a time, it's probably doing that to other people as well. So to start that off with, I always like to include the Weslaco Museum. Weslaco Museum is actually in the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas, far South Texas. And for years, they did a birthday celebration. The celebration was kind of unique, or is kind of unique, for a few different reasons, but one of the main reasons is the fact that they did a fashion show using produce that was grown that particular year. So, there it goes. The Weslaco Annual Fashion Show. Clarissa Bali is wearing a suit made of shattered green fern. The lapel and her purse are made of mums, and the hat and shoes are fern trimmed in mums. Dorothy Carlisk, her dress is made out of 1,000 alfalfa leaves. The purse is overlaid with ground alfalfa. The jerkin is made of rows of the scarlet bracts of the poinsettia plant. Now I look at these things and I go, wow, those are amazing, they're beautiful. And I've talked to people in the Weslaco area that had no idea that this ever happened. Actually, since, like I said, I keep this particular slide in my slide deck pretty recent. Try that again. Keep it in my deck most of the time. And I was giving this presentation one time, and a gentleman on the front row says, my neighbor is a Carlisk, and his mom is from Weslaco. He actually went online that night, found this picture, went and grabbed his neighbor. This was his neighbor's mom. His mom had, or his neighbor had no idea that his mom was in this fashion show, or that these photos even existed. So it was a great opportunity for him to kind of bring another dimension of his mom's life into focus. And I thought that was fantastic. Some of these, like I said, are absolutely stunning and beautiful and amazing outfits. And then there are the others, which are a little more amusing. This always reminds me of like I Love Lucy and Lucille Ball. It's actually bell peppers. And then this guy, he's wearing eggplant, and it reminds me of the Wizard of Oz, one of the munchkins from the Wizard of Oz. And you can tell by his face that he's probably not too thrilled to be involved in this, but he did it because he got to have that really cool corncob pipe. Made it all worthwhile. We also work with public libraries. We've worked with the Burleson Public Library as example. They had access to a lot of historic newspapers. You can see from the different images that I've shown there that some of them are older newspapers from the 50s and 60s, and some of them are still fairly recent in the last few years. So we do have in our newspapers in particular, I believe our oldest newspaper is from the 1950s. 1940s. I'm sorry, not 1840s, and they go up to current times as well. We also work with different organizations, such as Lockheed Martin. They're in Fort Worth, Texas, and they started off doing a project with us where they provided us with a series of photographs. And I loved the photographs so much because they showed the real life Rosie the Riveter, and showed me, picture is worth 1,000 words. So I looked at a couple of these photos, and you can tell that you can only work steel with the perfectly applied lipstick, and as long as you, if you're holding a rivet gun and not actually using it, you need to hold it up and be hand on the hip. A joke, but it does provide a lot of information. And I love the fact that, like I said, these are real life Rosie the Riveters. These are real people, and they have real stories. And to add to these stories, we've actually been working with Lockheed Martin over the last 3 or 4 years to digitize all of their internal newsletters from this particular campus of theirs. So we have all of their newsletters dating back to the 1920s up through World War II and to present times. I think the most recent item we have from them is 2016. All of those, again, are full text searchable, so if you have a name or an event you want to type, you can pull that up. We also work with private partners. TV Willis is, of course, here in Texas, and they have provided us quite a few different photographs. They like to go to the antique stores around town and find different interesting photographs and find materials from very specific photography companies, and he provides us with these items. And this is also a good point in the presentation to point out that since 2009, we have made it a point to digitize the front and back of absolutely everything to make sure that we do have the full record of the item in case there is ever something written on the back, or we interpret this to say Beck, or Beck, but someone else sees it as Besk, and we are able to actually provide it so people can make their own decisions on that. As well as, like I said, books, we scan the front cover all the way to the back cover. A lot of the materials that we get are ledgers and personal diaries and journals and things of that nature, and people skipped around in those quite a bit. We've got one ledger that I can think of off the top of my head that has no writing in it until page 109. So if we didn't do that, we could potentially miss several hundred entries into something like that.
Is there an index for your pictures?
Not a specific index. There are ways to kind of search the pictures. If we have information like this one says Dalton Beck, we do include that information in our descriptions of the items so that they are searchable. But when you also look at the items, if we don't have that, we rely on descriptive metadata. So a child sitting in a chair holding a rattle, or a man standing on a wall, and we do try to make sure that we provide as much information as possible, but sometimes it just isn't there, so we depend on our users to kind of fill us in a little bit more on some of that information. And that's done through every item has a option for feedback, and we get quite a bit of feedback saying, that's my Uncle Jim. He is from blah 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 blah. Here's where he lived, and we get a pretty robust amount of information, but just the sheer volume of photographs, I would say maybe 10% have that level of detail. We also work with academic libraries. The University of Texas in San Antonio provided us with a lot of great materials. One of my favorites on this particular slide is the armadillo race. There's not much that's more Texan than having an armadillo race, and I personally look at it and go, I don't think I could do it, because don't they carry botulism? Governmental collections, we worked with the Texas Historical Commission to digitize quite a bit of materials that they have. They do the land markers, historic markers from across the state, and kind of keep track of that. They also, a couple of years ago, brought us 15 card catalog drawers full of 4x5 negatives of photographs that had been taken from between 1954, I believe, to the early 80s, and said, here you go, can you digitize these? And we did. We actually ended up creating a whole new process for digitization because of the volume of negatives that we had to go through. Otherwise, it would have taken probably 6 years, and we were able to get it done in about 2. Genealogical and Historical Collections, the Dallas Genealogical Society. We've got all of their journals that they have published since the earliest ones. We've also got probate cases available on through them that they've provided us. Some of the lesser known resources that we have on the portal of Texas History. We have patents. We have quite a few patents. As you can see there, there's over 7,000 patents listed. And some of these are really quite amazing, and some of them are just really kind of funny. So looking at some of them, I think my second favorite one is the one on the bottom right, the improvement in umbrella supporters, because it is a parasol attached to the woman's bustle for the woman on the go that has to do, all these different things like fan herself. Thought that was kind of amusing, just interesting imagery, I guess. But my all-time favorite patent has to be this one, mud scraper. And I say that because it is G.A. Mangum was the creator of this mud scraper. And being a Mangum, working with genealogists, I had to do some research and I found this and went, ooh, interesting. So I'm waiting for my mud scraper millions to come rolling in. Once they're in, I'm just cloud shaped like Jake. But until then, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. We also have city directories. City directories are interesting because they provide combinations of information. They provide direct information, hence the name directory, but they provide physical addresses, phone numbers, information like that. But they also provide an opportunity for a lot of inferred information. And this is kind of the same thing as what a newspaper does, because you can infer information by looking at these and looking at the advertisements that are in these. How long was a business listed in these different directories? When did it go? When did it go away? What is the size of the advertisement? Kind of can let you know how well a business is doing. Like I said, when it goes away, what happened to it? Did it burn down? Where do I need to go? What year is this? What time frame am I looking at that this change happened? It's kind of interesting. And it's always fun to show these things to the younger generations, because they have no idea how phones worked. And no one in the younger generations really recognizes the process to make a long distance phone call was you called the operator, they said, great, stay by your phone, and I'll give you a call back when there's a long distance line available. Not even to mention party lines and the whole listening for a very specific ring and sneaking on listening to other people's conversations, things like that. We also have maps. All of our print maps are full text searchable. Some of the smaller ones you can see there, like the Cook County, that information is not full text searchable, but a great deal of the maps are. When I first started working for the portal, we were almost at that 1 million mark of items. And so when we crossed, or as we crossed the 1 millionth item mark, we actually worked with our special projects, or I'm sorry, our special collections in the UNT libraries, and they made a purchase of a map for our 1 millionth item. And this particular map is kind of interesting for a few different reasons. One, it is the Gulf of Mexico, but you look at it and you go, that's not the shape of the Gulf of Mexico that I'm familiar with. But then you have to take a closer look at it and notice the compass rose is actually pointing off to your right instead of directly up. So north is that way. So if you have to tilt your head and go, oh, there's Texas, there's the Texas coast, there's Louisiana, and there's Mexico. Okay, I see that now. So kind of an interesting thing. All right, so I told y'all that we would talk a little bit about Gamel's Law. I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with Gamel, but first things first. Hans Peter Marius Nielsen Gamel, apparently his parents wanted him to have one of the longest names possible. One of the many times, or I say many, the Texas Capitol has caught on fire a handful of times. And one of the times that it caught on fire in 1897, in the process of putting out the fire, the fire brigade destroyed a lot of records pertaining to Texas, early records of Texas. So, I mean, there's early colonization laws, proceedings from constitutional conventions, and all laws and resolutions passed from every congressional and legislative session from statehood to 1897 when the fire happened. They got all of these materials wet, and they thought they were ruined, so they basically just picked them up and put them on the rubbish pile on the side. Gamel comes along, sees this massive mound of history, takes them all, hangs them out to dry, binds them into 31 volumes, and sells them back to the state and anyone else who he thinks might want it. We have all 31 volumes, all full text searchable, available for free on the portal to Texas History. Yearbooks are another one of those that I think is fun, and this is kind of a section that I have to apologize up front because I have a pretty dark sense of humor, and this is the section of the presentation that really kind of shows that. It starts off light enough, but I apologize in advance if it gets a little dark. You can see a series of different yearbooks here. Right there in the middle, there's the Cottontail. This is the University of North Texas' very first yearbook. It's from 1905-1906, and this was back when we were the North Texas State Normal College. It was a teaching institution. And it was the only year that we were the vicious, fearsome, mighty Cottontails. Nothing strikes fear in the heart of man quite like the Cottontails. Now, inside this yearbook, there is a dedication to this man. He was President Kendall. He passed away of consumption, and this is the part where my dark sense of humor kind of kicks in. And I look at this photograph, and I think, it's really sad, and it's, he was a young man. He shouldn't have died when he did. But I look at this photograph, and all I can really see is this fantastic asymmetric handlebar mustache. And I have a theory on this, and it's totally made up, and it's totally a joke. But my joke theory is he was like, I'm going to have my picture today. And he was preparing and trimming his mustache in the mirror, and he had a coughing fit. And that's how it goes quickly. Like I said, I don't think that's even remotely the truth, but it's something that continues to spin in my head for as long as I've been doing these presentations. And I will say at one point I gave this and did this joke, and someone said, "Have you seen his ear?" And someone chimed in with, "Well, look at his eye. He was just a crooked man who lived in a crooked house," is my thoughts. University of North Texas Library, or University of North Texas, has had a few Kindle halls. I think they have decided that they aren't going to be doing any more Kindle halls, as one was struck by lightning and burnt to the ground, and another was bulldozed and used as parking spots. We've also worked with the San Antonio Public Library. They have a large collection of African American funeral programs. Currently on the portal to Texas History, we have 3,778 programs digitized from the 1930s all the way up to present. These are a really great thing, great resource, because obituaries and having information put into a newspaper tends to be cost prohibitive. Being that you have to pay for either every letter or every word, you can't get a whole lot of information about an individual into an obituary. But these programs, they're multi-page. They tell a story about this person's life, and that's what genealogy is to me, is filling in that dash between those two dates, the birth date and the death date. All of that the meat, is all contained in that little dash. And these did a great job, or do a great job, of providing that additional information. We do actually have more of their programs in the lab right now. There's just over 1,000 of them that are in the process of being digitized and having metadata created for them. We also have the correspondence ledger of the Kempner family. I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with the name Kempner, but most likely you've probably heard of Imperial Sugar. That is Kempner. There is a suburb just north of Houston, also now its own city as well, called Sugarland. They are also responsible for Sugarland being in existence, because that's where a large part of their farms were, and a lot of their resources came from there. The interesting thing about this particular ledger is from Harris Kempner, who was a businessman in Galveston in the mid to late 1800s. In this book, he documents all of his business letters in the front of the book. This entire book is probably about 4 inches, 3 to 4 inches thick. The entire book is rice paper. And once you flip open past the, it has alphabetical tabs. Once you get past the alphabetical tabs, it starts with the letters. And the letters all, like I said, are alphabetical letters, or not alphabetical, all their business letters. But the part that's really interesting about this book to me is if you open close it and flip it over the other way and open it from the back, there's a whole nother set of personal letters written to his family back home in Poland in phonetic Yiddish. And the Harris and Eliza Kempner Fund actually worked with us to get these materials onto the portal to Texas History. And they, in the process, while we were having it digitized, they also found a rabbi in, I want to say she's in Boston, that transcribed and translated all of the Yiddish in the back of the book. So we have the English versions of these letters in the back as well, connected to this particular item, which I think is fantastic and amazing. I really enjoy etymology of words and kind of thinking about how words have changed over time. And so the thought of this language that is thousands of years old, having to first put your mindset into what it said 150 years ago to translate it to what it's saying today, or how we would translate it today, I think is an interesting kind of thought process. It's something that I enjoy thinking about. We also have newspapers, quite a wide range of newspapers. Information you can get from newspapers, of course, birth and death, marriage announcements, military service, land purchases, promotions, advertisements for family businesses, again, like I was talking about with the directories, kind of understanding the implied information of how well a business was doing based on the number of advertisements you see, how large the advertisements are, and things of that nature. Travel announcements and social activities, those are some of my favorite bits of information that you can find in some of the smaller newspapers. I think back to when I would go visit family in Iowa, my grandmother would make sure that the newspaper knew that we were coming, and would, so the entire town would know, basically, because they're going to have family coming. Come say hi to them, type of thing. So, like I've said before, a lot of people are curious how we actually get these materials onto the portal to Texas History. So I thought I would take a moment and kind of talk about the process, talk about the labs, and kind of what we do. See, look there. She's not actually tied to the chair. We didn't do anything like that, but she does have 2 different screens that she's working with. I'll start off with the newspaper lab, because behind the scenes, the Portals to Texas History is kind of broken up into 2 different groups. There is the digital newspaper unit, and then there's everything else. This on screen right now is the digital newspapers. All of these boxes on the shelves that are lining all the walls are newspapers. Most times we get a lot of newspapers, physical papers sent to us. They a lot of times come to us as bound volumes. That is not the current standard for preservation of newspapers. Newspapers don't really have the enough margin, or are they strong enough to really hold the weight of all the papers being put into a bound volume. So we go through the process of disbinding them and putting them in archival boxes instead. And so you can see that on the left, there are two scanners. In the image on the left, there's one. I don't know that I can actually show you. I don't know if you'll see my mouse or not, but in the left-hand side, you can see there's the screen, the two different screens, and just above it, there's kind of a black box. That is the black box above itself is the scanner. So what it is doing is lighting the page and taking a digital photograph of it right then. So that's how we get a lot of our materials digitized now, is we actually take photographs just because it's quicker. And they can move through the different projects a lot faster. In the top right photograph, you can see more boxes, and then there is a blue scanner on the left, on the side as well. This is kind of an interesting one. It's one of those ones that I look at and watch it work, and it just makes me so happy. It's kind of a ridiculous thing, but it really does, because there's an armature that moves across and lights up and takes a continuous scan as it moves across. And then once it's done, an entire glass plate lifts up. The student is able to flip the page, the glass can go back down, and the scanner can go back across. And while it's moving across the item, you can actually see on the screen that's just out of the camera shot here, the item filling in. And just watching it work it's just a thing of beauty. Lastly on this, the bottom right, there is a microfilm scanner. It is small. It's probably 18 inches tall, about 10 inches wide. Not a particularly large thing, but though she be but little, she is fierce is kind of the most accurate description I could think of for this, because it runs through a roll of microfilm in about 30 minutes. And not only does it do that, but it also notices the black space between the different images and digitally slices those images up and numbers all of the different pages for them. So then we have students that can go back through and make sure that the borders are correct and that everything that the scanner did it appropriately, and then make sure all of the information is numbered and documented correctly. Then there's the Everything Else Lab. The Digital Projects Lab works in a very similar fashion. We have a lot more variety in the scanners and resources that we use than the newspaper unit does. In your bottom right, you can see that there are about 6 different tables set up with bays of different scanner types. We have found over the years that different scanners work best for different resources work best with different scanners. So the flatbed scanners work well for one-page documents and for smaller flat items like photographs. Some of the larger scanners, like you can see on the top right, is another one of those armatures that moves across. It works for books and some larger items, including maps and things of that nature. One thing that I will point out in this that's not really shown in this photograph is the cradle that the book's sitting on is adjustable, so it will be able to accommodate a book and the spine and the binding better and get a clear shot of it. On the top left, you can see all of the different projects that we are working with at any given moment. And then the bottom left, you can see another camera armature setup that we have. This was actually the armature that was used to do all the negatives from the Texas Historical Commission, the 15 card catalog drawers full of 4x5 negatives. We have a light box that we set the negative on and took a picture from above, adjusted it in about 30 seconds, and moved on to the next one. If we were to scan those at the same resolution on one of the flatbed scanners, it would take probably 3 to 5 minutes, depending on the particular image, to get everything that we would normally get. All right, so you look at this and you go, that's not really anything, any sort of digitization. This is our big whiteboard. It's about 13, 14 feet long, and it's magnetic, and we keep track of all of the different projects that are working in the lab with these magnetic tabs. And so you can, so we move them around, different projects around, and it's just kind of an at a glance. We're able to organize the materials in a fashion that helps us kind of visually think about where things are and what needs to be worked on next, because we do work in kind of a queue, a set of queues. Everything that comes in starts at the bottom and works its way up to the top of the queue before it gets scanned, and then moves on to the next phase and goes through that process all over again, being queued up. So this is a little bit of information about how we do it as far as the actual process. This is what is in the whiteboards that you were just seeing. Once materials arrive, they're inventoried, documented, assigned, and scanned. We do have very specific standards for scanning different types of items. Like I said, there are 36 different resource types, and each one has its own unique standards that we scan by. Once an item is digitized, we do two different quality control checks. One to make sure that everything that was sent to us was scanned, and then another quality control to make sure that our standards were met. And then once an item has gone through the quality control process, they are added to the portal as hidden files, at which time they are queued up for metadata creation, which metadata, I'm not sure how familiar you are with it, but it is essentially the information about the information item. So this is, like you see, the title, the creator, all of that. We have a very robust system in place to get as much metadata and as much information as possible into the system so people can use it appropriately. Then once all the metadata is created, the item is made visible on the portal and is searchable. All of the items are inventoried again to make sure we didn't have any stowaways, and then sent back to the partners that work with us. Now, this is the part that probably is interesting to most of you, more interesting to most of you than anything else I've said so far, searching on the portal. So at texashistory.unt.edu, like I said before, you can just hit search in the search field and pull up all the million plus items that we have. As a librarian, I have to say, don't do that. Don't do that and just hit next page, next page, next page, next page, next page, unless you're just browsing. If you are looking for something specific, there are better ways of doing that. This particular example that I'm going to walk you through is a little unrealistic, or it's pretty unrealistic in all of the steps that I'm walking you through, but I wanted to highlight the different qualifiers, the filters on the left-hand side there. So you can see partner collection serials, serial or series titles, resource types, world regions, countries, U.S. states, counties, decades, years, months, days, languages. Those are a big chunk of the metadata that was entered into the system in the previous slides. You can also organize the materials. By default, it will show you the most recently added, like I said, but you can choose to look for the oldest item that we have, or choose to look for the newest, not newest added, but the newest created item. For this particular example, though, I'm going to go ahead and take us through kind of a search through the decades. So if you hit decade, it'll pull up a menu, and you can choose the 1940s. You can see that there are 94,565 items still there. That still is way too many to just kind of begin hitting next page. I would highly recommend, if you have an idea of where you're looking, narrow it down further before you just start hitting the next page. So for this example, like I said, I'm going to do this and recognizing that it isn't fully a realistic search in this regard, because you could have just gone directly to years and you wouldn't have to go through the decades and kind of whittle down that number in the same way. But if you have an idea, you want to look at 1943, click on that, and that brings it down to 9,522 items. We're slowly dwindling that number down to a smaller number. Then you can choose the resource types, for example, and say you want to look at the newspaper specifically. There are 5,561 newspapers. Still too many, but you get the idea of how you can kind of narrow that down incrementally by using the different filters on the left-hand side. For this particular example, since we've spent enough time kind of showing that, I figured we would go ahead and go into the item. And we'll talk about the information each item has. So this is a newspaper, like I said before. What we do with our metadata is, since all of our print materials are full text searchable, we don't do, and we can't afford to have students read every newspaper article and have metadata created for the specific articles in a newspaper. So what we do is we create metadata for the issues of newspapers. And it works out pretty well since, like I said, they're all full text searchable anyway, so we can pull that, you can pull that information pretty easily. About this particular issue, over on the top left, we'll start with the who. This provides you with the editor, the publisher, the audience, who provided the information to us. Then there is the what. What is this thing? It is a newspaper. It's the Wertham Journal, volume number 44, number 43, edition 1, Friday, February 26th, 1943. And then we give a description of not only what is this item, but what does it look like. So there's the description, a weekly newspaper, and the physical description. Here are its dimensions. Here's the size of this item. And I have to admit, for years, I didn't pay attention to the size of items the way I should, particularly in art class when I was in high school. I remember seeing, looking at the book and seeing Monet's water lilies and seeing these numbers afterwards, but I was always transfixed on the image of the water lilies, and it's like, wow, that's really pretty, that's interesting, I like the use of color, I like all these other aspects. And it didn't happen until years later when I went to New York and saw the size of the water lilies, that I just was like, oh, I should probably be paying attention to that information. Those dimensions are hugely important when you see the water lilies take up the entire wall, or know that the Mona Lisa is, fairly small. Other information in the what section is the specific collection, how it came to us. So for this particular example, it was a Ocr Foundation grant, and it is also part of the digital newspaper program. One of the things I really like about working with digital materials is that we can have, in theory, as many collections, one item in as many collections as we want. We try to limit it so that it is useful and makes it searchable and helps people find items, but it's literally just drawing a digital string from this item into all these different collections. And so you can see that there are 3 different collections that this particular item is involved in, whereas a physical item isn't able to do that. It's stuck in one spot. Next, when was this item created, the time period that it deals with, and when it was added to the portal to Texas History. You can see here also that there are usage statistics. When was this item last used? For every item in every collection, we keep track of how many times something is used. Were you in this item for a minute? Were you in this item for 29 minutes? Were you in this item for 35 minutes? This information kind of is used to help partners justify the digitization and hosting of these items on the portal to Texas History. Lastly, where is an item located? You can see that there's a place name and publication place, and then we have a map that is able to be zoomed in and zoomed out to give specific information for people. Keyword searching is how you will probably use the portal to Texas History most often. So if you go, hopefully everyone is kind of familiar with the concept of adding quotation marks around multiple terms to link those phrases together. So it searches for Johnson County right next to each other versus Johnson over here and County way over here, and they don't have any relation to each other. So putting quotation marks around it will link it together and make sure that those two words have to be side by side for it to be used. So putting the Great War in quotation marks, it pulls up 16,632 items. And as opposed to doing the faceted search through all the different filters on the left, I'm going to go ahead and skip that. And I'm going to show you that first in the middle, you'll see that this looks a little bit different than the last view of all the different resources that were listed previously. And that's because the second option there in the middle, I changed it. I changed the view to a tiled view rather than a list view. That works well when you're working with photographs in particular, which I tend to look at a lot of photographs because a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? The 16,000 is still way too many to just start hitting next page, next page. I would highly recommend using the filters on the left, but in the interest of time, we won't do that today. So we'll click on the very first item here. And you can see on the right-hand side, on the left-hand side, there is a option for matching results, and that there are 6 different results that match Great War, as well as on the left-hand side in green box that will jiggle this. So this animation doesn't do that jiggle justice. It jiggles at a faster pace and kind of really gets your attention versus the slow, methodic movement that this slideshow does. So we've got 2 different spots where you can find the results for this. And you click on either one, and it will give you the list view again of the different sequences that Great War is mentioned in. And you click on it, and it'll pull it up like it did previously. Lastly, for the search suggestions I have, this works particularly well with photographs and for books, not so much with newspapers. Browsing by subject. If you click on the Explore By, there's subject. There's 1,102 different subject headings that you can search by. You click on that, and you can see on the left, bottom left, there are specific top term levels. And what's interesting to me is how these different these terms nest inside of each other. So you can see agriculture, domestic animals, cattle, agriculture, domestic animals, donkeys, so forth and so on, all the way down. And you can build out a pretty robust search string from that, and it'll pull up all the different items. Then I wanted to go ahead and talk to you because I always get the question that this is fantastic, but I don't have any ancestors in Texas. Who else is doing this? So we've worked with Chronicling America. They're funded through the support of NEH, which is the National Endowment for Humanities, and they host over 15 million pages of U.S. newspapers starting back into the 1700s. UNT is the institution that represents Texas, and their website is chroniclingamerica.loc.gov, and LOC is Library of Congress. All of their materials are full text searchable, very much like the portal to Texas History, and it is entirely free as well. They also have a listing of other resources from other states. So there's Chronicling America, which I said already, and there's the Gateway to Oklahoma History. Gateway to Oklahoma History, if you have seen the portal to Texas History, you have essentially seen and are familiar with the layout of the Gateway to Oklahoma. They actually are run by the Oklahoma Historical Society, and they are run on our servers, and the same exact layout, different information of course, but the same layout, same faceted searching and filters, same search terms, different things like that, all the same in that. Library of Congress also has a state memory project list. So at this website here, you can find every state that has a project similar to the portal to Texas History. I am biased, and I will say that the portal to Texas History is best, but these others are pretty good too. That being said, I will make this entire presentation. I will provide the slide deck to Sue so that she can share this information, anything, bits and pieces of it that you all need. And that kind of brings me to the end of the presentation. So I will open it up for questions.
Okay, that was wonderful. We do have some questions. Let's see here. Let me go back up to the top of the chat box here. Let's see here. You already answered Stephen's questions about the index for the photographs in the portal. Let's see here. Stephen also wanted to know for the photo portal, the photo portion of your portal, who have you collaborated with on the photos?
So we've worked with over 400 partners, so it would almost be a shorter list to say who we haven't. One thing I can do, I'll show you here real quick. We've collaborated with 215 different partners to put photographs on. And these range, like you can see here, the UNT Special Collections, Hardin-Simmons University, several different universities and archives. But then we've also worked with some private partners to digitize their family collections, as well as, just like I said, the T.B. Willis collection is he finds images that are important to him in some way, or special. He thinks they're special in some way, and he wants them shared and thinks they're important enough to be shared worldwide. So not one specific partner, one specific type of partner that we work with that does that.
Now, I have a question, and everybody else in the class, if you'd like to unmute your microphone, leave your camera off, please, but unmute your microphone if you'd like to ask Jacob a question directly. But in the meantime, while we're waiting for the students to do that, I have a question, just more of a librarian kind of question myself. Out of all those partners and all the thousands upon thousands of items that they have, you obviously have to have a workflow. I saw that long magnetic whiteboard that you had, but like, how do you manage such a massive amount of items? There has to be a way to logically get them in, because you just can't have everyone doing dumps of everything they have into your storage facility. I mean, obviously you have a workflow for it. How do you determine like what is important that has to be digitized first?
So we try to not make a determination on what has to be or what is important, because everyone's history is important to them. You know, we believe that. What we do instead is, like I said, we work in a queue system, so it's kind of a first come, first serve. Let's see if this shows up. But as far as our workflow, we use a few different things. So you saw the whiteboard. We also have internal wiki pages that we create for each project that's coming through. And then we have a system called Trello that we work with, and they have a series of different boards that, so we're in the imaging master. You can see each one of these represents a different project that's either in the works, coming in, currently scheduled, is working on inventory, is being disbound, is having imaging already done on it, is ready to go back to the partner, things like that. Let's see, and then we've got similarly the OCR and Metadata Board, which is all the different processes for each one, and we just kind of work through those and add notes to each one of those, as well as the wiki page. These are much more involved and have much more detail associated with them than the big whiteboard. The whiteboard is just kind of at a glance, oh, that project is in this stage, and it just kind of helps to be a quick visual of where things are.
You know, I think this has been like one of the best presentations I think I've ever seen in our class about the workings behind the scene, because the one thing we all love is instant access to information, like photographs or yearbooks or whatever it is. But it's wonderful to have my students appreciate the incredible amount of time in hours of work and workflow processes as well that makes all this information available to us for free. I mean, it's just it's an amazing, I mean, I'm a librarian. I've been a librarian for like 30 years. And I mean, I can certainly appreciate the incredible job that you guys have done to make all this information available to everybody all over the world. I mean, it's absolutely incredible.
Thank you.
Let's see here. I'm looking in the chat box. Let's see here. No questions. Once again, I'll encourage the class to unmute your microphone and ask a question directly to Jake if you have one. If not, I've got a list of some questions that I was thinking about during your presentation.
I would like to. I've got a question, of course.
Okay. Go ahead.
In your search parameters, your keywords, you talked about using quotes to search for two words as one.
Yes.
Does it do any other Boolean things like and?
It absolutely does, and I'm glad that you asked that because I was on the verge of showing that. So yes, you can use Boolean terms, so the and, or, and not, all caps between the different terms. And if anyone that's in the class isn't already familiar with Boolean search terms, if you click on the search, one of the things that the group that's been working on this for years has done exceptionally well is they've started creating different search options and different ways of searching because they are recognizing or have recognized that there's such a vast difference in how people search. One person searches versus how another person searches. So they've tried to make it as user-friendly and as accessible and available as possible. So if you click on the search button, like I said, I showed you there, just clicking on the green search box there, it will take you to this page where you can do a basic search, but there's also guided search. So if you're not familiar with the proper ways or how you can use a Boolean search really well, the guided search is one of those really fantastic resources that has been created because it allows you to see how a librarian builds a search term. So say we want to look for this exact phrase. This is putting the quotation marks on without putting the quotation marks, right? So, Great War. But we don't want battleship. Well, if I can type, it helps. So you can see up in the green bar above the search terms, it put the quotation marks Great War and then did a minus for battleship. And you can keep building and building and building this search string to get a very precise set of results. As you go down, you can see there are additional, you want specific date ranges, you're looking for a specific, something from a specific partner or collection or language or resource type. You can fill all of those in and hit search. And it'll pull up the items that have Great War but don't mention battleship.
And there's some really great examples on the internet of and or not Boolean searching that show you, how to combine terms, how to exclude terms. But once again, a note to the class, doing these Boolean searches can be incredibly time-saving and incredibly rewarding. However, if you go too deep into an advanced Boolean searching, you might be excluding information that would be resulted in unintentionally. So if after today's presentation you'd like to talk more about using Boolean searching, I'd be more than happy to work with you individually. So I just wanted to put that little in. And Stephen, I see you.
That was really great, and I appreciate it. It's very much like Google search tool.
It is very similar to Google. Like I said, Google, they're the masters of making things easy. They had a verb named after them. Things are Googled now. So they've succeeded in their mission of making things, information accessible. And we did try to follow that model and follow the example that was kind of set forward by all the different search engines. And just like every other search engine, as things grow and evolve and information changes, we are trying to move everything forward in similar fashion so that we remain relevant and the resources we have remain accessible and relevant.
Okay, I see Wendy has a question. Wendy, if you'd like to unmute your microphone, please do.
Jake, I really appreciate your presentation and in-depth of what you do. I guess my question is I'm the family holder of all the pictures and letters. I have correspondence letters that my grandpa and grandma wrote about 95 years ago to each other. Got married when they were going to University of Nebraska. And I would really like to share those, but how do I do that? Do I share that with do I reach out to Nebraska University? Do I reach out to, I guess what I want to do is I don't want to be the dam. I don't want to be the one stopping all the pictures and the information. I want to share it and get it out to other people.
Absolutely. So I would suggest checking this URL is always too long for me to remember smoothly, so I will just kind of cut and paste it instead. I would check and see through this URL to specifically find resources in Nebraska, and then see from there what their contact information is, and see what they have, if they have any sort of way of getting these materials and have an interest in them. If they, for some reason, aren't interested in having those particular materials, you might also check with a state genealogical society or historical society.
Okay, all right, that's great. Well, I'm excited about the Texas piece because my uncle was the first president of the Houston Oil Men's Association or something like that. He invented a tool to fish drop tools out of the drilling shafts. And so I'm really excited about finding more information about him. So this will be perfect because, he was that special uncle that was the inventor, the engineer. So
excellent. Everyone needs to have one of those.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Certainly.
And Wendy, let me also recommend that if you digitize it all, you can put it on familysearch.org, and it'll always be preserved as well. And I'm sure a lot of people who are researching your family would love to have that. And of course, if you don't have access to digitizing machinery, equipment, you can go to the TMCC Library. We do have high-speed scanners that are available to the public for free. Of course, like I said, right now our library is closed due to the virus. However, I believe the LDS Family Search Library in Carson City is open, and I think Stephen's still online here. Maybe Stephen, you could talk a little bit about that.
Yes, we saw the need for fast and easy scanning years ago, and bought a scanner that does pictures exceptionally well. We can scan them 20 pictures in the time that it normally takes people for one, and we scan them at a higher resolution, and we do both sides. We drop it in on a file that you can put on the thumb drive and take home. Mm-hmm. So we really make it great, and we've trained our people to help you be more successful at getting really good digital copies that you can share with anyone.
And also, Stephen, I know Wendy was talking about how she has all these wonderful photos. And not only can you help her for free to get all these scanned, but you can also help her for free to get them all into the Ancestors profile at the same time, correct?
Yes, that's true.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
I would also mention, be very particular about your naming conventions. Be mindful of it when you're doing it, because it's easier to have it in mind beforehand versus having to go back and change everything later.
Great advice, Jacob. Yeah, I think we all need to be better about naming conventions, since we all digitize so much these days.
Oh yeah, and I'm guilty of it too. My flash drives at home are a mess. Yeah, I know that they are. I can find stuff, but it's because I know where things are, and kind of know what I have to begin with, and that's where the challenges come with not having a good, consistent naming convention. Is we know where things are, but if anyone else is trying to use this later, they may not.
Well, there are lots of file renaming tools. One particular that really is, it takes a computer type mind to use because it's so powerful. But I'd be glad to help people who had collections and wanted to rename them or fix them, or whatever you want to do with your digital things, I'll be glad to help you.
Wonderful, Stephen. I think, Wendy, you had another question. Go ahead and unmute your microphone.
Yeah, how do we get a hold of Stephen? How do we get a hold of him and make an appointment? Is that something you could send out to us, Sue?
Yeah, I put that in the chat box, but this is a great opportunity for Stephen to go ahead and talk about it.
All right. About the Family History Center?
Yeah, your hours, how they get a hold of you, how they make an appointment.
Our Family History Center is right next to the Carson City High School on Salmon Way, and we're open from 1 to 7 Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And I'm there from 1 to 3:30, and then I have to go to work. But this too shall pass. So, we've got lots of people who are trained, and they're doing their genealogy, but they love to stop and help you and teach you and show you how to do some really neat stuff. It's fun, and they love it, and they want you to love it as well. So we can teach you how to do genealogy. We can give you access to Ancestry.com if you don't have a paid subscription. We can help you with our search as our partners. We have partnerships with almost everybody that does genealogy, and then you can always get an appointment with, and my phone number is 775-301-3359, and we'll set up an appointment for you to come down and do it. Again, our library hours are 1 to 7 on Tuesdays and Wednesday, and we'd love to help you out.
And if anybody wants to know, it's very close to restaurants as well. So if you go there and you plan to spend multiple hours, there are several restaurants within like just a few minutes of the LDS library there on Salomon. And for those people who are logged in today from outside of Nevada, there are listings. Maybe Stephen, you can maybe go over that. There are LDS libraries all over the country.
Yes, if you go to familysearch.org and look up on the upper right-hand side, you could click and say, where's the closest family history center to me?
Wonderful.
And they're not all stacked the same way, but not only get their address and their telephone number, but call ahead and make sure. And if you have any problem, I'll be glad to help you out, or you could even call the people. People do genealogy 24 hours a day, and there are volunteers all around the world who will take your call and help you.
And just to kind of cap off that topic, Stephen, I've even called on late Sunday afternoons, and they still pick up the phone. So, I can't tell you enough how much we appreciate what the LDS library have done for everybody here about making information, just like the Texas portal, access to information for free. So with that, I kind of wanted to
I've called at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, you beat me. Wonderful. That's even better to know. Okay, I just kind of wanted to bring it back to Jake's presentation here. I wanted to kind of just mention how exciting it would be to find your ancestor as a model in one of those fashion show pictures. I mean, wouldn't that put a real bend in your family history story, that you're going to, hopefully everybody will self-publish. And then also, let's see here. let me look over my notes here. In the 1920s to 40 censuses showed you your Texas ancestor. Oh, I know what this was about. I had to remember what I was actually trying to say here in my notes. Wouldn't it be wonderful to find your ancestor in one of those company newsletters or company magazines? And I kind of wanted to like share a personal experience with that. My husband is from out of this country originally. He's a citizen here now, but originally he was born overseas and in the Middle East. And I actually have been working on his ancestry now for quite a long time. And I've got to tell you, there are certainly obstacles when you try to research Middle Eastern ancestry. However, because the oil industry has been so big in the Middle East for so many years, I got to tell you, some of the best sources I have found on tracing his family history are oil company newsletters. And I have found pictures of his ancestors. I have found articles about them, about what they were doing there, for that particular company. So do not underestimate company newsletters. They could be very, very, very valuable, especially if you're researching, in my particular case, Middle Eastern ancestors. And then also, Jake was kind enough to go over patents. And I got to tell you, patent research for genealogy is not just an interesting footnote of your ancestor about maybe how smart he was or how smart she was, but also it puts your ancestor in a time and place, because you may see just the picture of the product that person was patenting, but you can actually pull off the Library of Congress the actual application where he or she signed and dated it, and it had to put their address as well. So we don't there are so many resources to use to put your ancestor in a place and time. It looks like Jake is going to show us an example. This is great.
So we have the patents, but we also have letters pertaining to them, things like that. And so if you go into one of the patents, let's see. There are 5 pages associated with this particular patent. So there's a lot of information that's more than just the pretty picture. Like I said, I am drawn to the pictures because I love the imagery associated with them, but there's a lot of text associated as well that's fully very robust and very helpful.
And I myself my father did several patents and my grandfather did several patents. And I got to tell you, that's a real interesting part of my write-up on those particular ancestors' lives. Patents are really a fascinating thing. It gives you kind of an insight into the working mind of the person that you're writing about. So also, Jake, you brought up a wonderful example of the value of yearbook research. I wanted to share with the class very briefly the value of yearbooks. I have 2 particular ancestors that died in the 1980s. They were born probably around the turn of the century. And both the brother and sister never got married. They never had children. And because they died in the 1980s, there's very few people alive today that ever even knew them, because they've been dead for quite a while now. And no one has any idea what happened to their material belongings, their photo albums or anything. So to my knowledge, and I spent years researching this branch of the family, no one had anything to do with them as far as photographs. And I was able in yearbooks to trace back. And to this day, it is the only known photos of those people because nobody has any idea what happened since they were single when they both died. The brother died first, and then I'm sure the sister, inherited all his material items in life, like photographs and documents. But then she died, and she was never married as well. So nobody has any idea, whether it just all ended up in the trash can or whatever the case was. However, had it not been for yearbooks, these people would never have a face. It's truly amazing the value of yearbook research. So thank you, Jake, for bringing that subject up. And then also, I was fascinated by the list that you showed about the African American funeral programs from the 1930s to the present. I'm just out of curiosity because, I'm a real collector myself. Maybe that's why I went into librarianship, because since I was a kid, I think I've got everything I ever owned out in garages and in boxes and such. I've been a collector my whole life. Out of curiosity, from the 1930s to present, how did anyone gather, or to your knowledge, if you know, how did they gather all these African American funeral programs together from all those decades?
Yeah, so it started off with one family member collecting them from their friends, and family as they passed, and then as as the collection grew and as they aged, it went on to another family member and kind of grew and expanded from there. And it eventually became so unwieldy for the individuals to kind of work with that I'm not sure how they made the connection that, this is important stuff. Let's send it to the library, but it got to the San Antonio Public Library and their history and genealogy section in particular. And Matt DeWalshy there has been a real proponent for furthering this collection and getting more and more materials. And so he's worked with the civil rights groups and different organizations across San Antonio and the surrounding area to help make sure that the community knows that this is a resource that is available, and that if they have funeral programs, they can consider contributing them there.
Wow, that is amazing. I am just so impressed. Wow. And then also, I kind of wanted to impress into the minds of the students here in class today the importance of newspaper. We all know it's important, but sometimes that 1 or 2 line article in a newspaper can break down your brick wall.
Mm-hmm.
I just cannot tell you how much we appreciate the work you've put into digitizing these newspapers that allow us to access this for free. I mean, I myself have a sample. I'll quickly share with the class. I had an ancestor that disappeared between 1920 and 1925. My mother was born in 33, so she never knew this uncle that went missing. And through DNA, I was able to locate a grandson of this person, and I found out that this person changed their name. However, I did not know why that person changed their name until I found about a 2-line article in a Texas newspaper that said he was a deserter from the Army and he was a wanted man. So it was just a very unnoticeable, like I said, 2 or 3 line item in the newspaper, but it mentioned him by name, and it mentioned him by where he was originally from. And that answered, probably a 50-year-old mystery, maybe even more than that, actually, like about a 70 or 80-year-old mystery in my family. So we now know, not only thanks to DNA, that he changed his name, but we now know why he changed his name. And it hadn't been for that, like I said, that very small little article in the Texas newspaper, we may never have known the reason why.
Yeah. So you got me thinking about, kind of the newspapers we have, and you can see that we have a lot of newspapers. And I told you that our first newspaper dates back to the 1840s, but we do have newspapers that are outside of Texas that date back further than that. So I'll remove that real quick, and I can show you. Oldest, we have 116 from the 1810s. They're Washington, D.C. newspapers. So we do have national materials. One of the things I like to tell people is that when we are talking about history of any particular area or any particular group, it's not geographically bound, because people aren't geographically bound. We get up and we move. We can go to war overseas and write letters from there. So there's reference to France, there's reference to Germany, there's reference to all the different countries in Africa. They're all over the place. And just what our focus is Texas history, all that means is we can draw that line back to Texas in some way, shape, or form, but it's not limited specifically to Texas. One newspaper that I think I'm trying to remember the title of it. I am drawing a complete and total blank, but you can see we have over 1,000 newspaper titles. There's 1 or 2 issues of a newspaper that was handwritten during by POWs, I believe, during the Civil War. And it's interesting to see because it's written in the columns, and they had different people from the POW camp writing different sections of it. So it's very, very neat and very tight handwriting, but it looks like a newspaper, but it's definitely a handwritten newspaper, which is kind of just a fascinating idea to me.
Wonderful. And then I have another question, a real quick question about, you said that most of the newspapers that come to you are bound in volumes.
Mm-hmm.
When you digitize them, do you have to take them out of the binding?
Yes.
Do you rebind them?
No.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
No, the current standard is for preservation purposes is to not bind them, because I mean, you look at the newspaper here, there's not a whole lot of room for margin, or there's not a whole lot of margin that would allow for binding in the first place. So when you do bind, you're running right up to the text, and then if you open that book up, the part of the text always ends up in the gutter. And if you try to press it flat, you're running the risk of tearing the pages.
Wow, that's as a librarian, that's a fascinating topic for me. So do you, I assume you put them into acid-free boxes for preservation purposes, and then do you return them to the original owner?
In the boxes, yes.
Understood. Okay,
We
excellent.
return them whenever the library or organization wants them back, we return them. We try to return them. How about that? Sometimes, because truth be told, some libraries run out of space, and they say, well, now these are digitized. We don't need these physical items anymore, because I can send someone to this website, and they can access all of that same information, and I've opened up all this storage space, type of thing. So we try to get it back to the partner. If they are not interested in having them back, we do check with our special collections at the university to see if they are interested in adding them to their Texana collection. A lot of times, if they don't have that title already, they will be added to their collection. If we do already have that title and it's not of better quality, then we don't have a need to keep those papers either.
So you just dispose of them then? I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. As a librarian, that breaks your heart, but I understand. There's a certain, you have to be reasonable. I understand. Yeah. So now you covered a couple of different kinds of ephemera. Are there other types of ephemera that you haven't discussed?
Yeah, we have. Like I said, there are 36 different resource types. Some of them. So you can see that there are clippings, there are data sets and images, interactive resources. Let's see. Music scores and notations is always kind of fun. The patents, physical objects. It's a good example. So we have pins, we have plates, we have that looks like a dog tag, different metals and things of that nature that we also collect.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And then the last question I have, unless the class has any other, if you do, go ahead once again and unmute your microphone, so the speaker can hear you. But my last question I have is, as a librarian, where do you get the funding?
That's a great question. So it started off with the portal started off with I believe it was a couple of $100,000 grant from the state of Texas Telecommunications Infrastructure Fund. It was a grant that gave us money to kind of get this ball rolling, and we continue to receive grants from IMLS grants. We get all over it. Ocr Foundation does specifically works with small communities. I think it's less than communities that have a population less than 10,000 people. They work with the libraries to digitize their newspapers. They also work with the libraries to get the furnishings and things like that to kind of help maintain, because they know that money is so incredibly tight, especially in small communities for a library. It's police, fire, and hospitals take precedent over libraries every time. Wow. So we work with a lot of different groups, and we are, continually getting grant funding, as well as the portal has been going on since 2004, and the library has seen the value in it and seen how much we grow. The university has seen value in it and seen how much it's grown. So the library has continued to support us and continue to work with us. Little over maybe 2 years ago, we actually had a faculty member in the history department try to break a world record. he succeeded. His world record was the longest continuous history lesson. So he talked for 26 hours and 34 minutes, almost straight, to a class. He taught to a class that had to also be awake and actively participating that entire time. So we got the Guinness Book of World Record, but during the breaks, and one of the kind of advertisements, as it were, in the lecture was for an endowment that we were working on. So we have actually gotten an endowment to help continue funding the portal to Texas history as well. So there's information on the endowment, and then let's see. Collaboration. So here's the list of the different external supporters that we have had.
Wow, that is so impressive. I'm jealous.
So I will.
Thankfully, it's now available to all of us, to benefit from.
I will point out DPLA is an interesting one as well, because it's the Digital Public Library of America. They harvest our metadata. So a few years ago, we made all of our metadata publicly accessible, and that's how search engines pull our information as well. But DPLA every month or so harvests our metadata and makes sure that is on their website as well. And their website is dp.la, and they've got content hubs across the nation as well.
Wonderful. Okay, so this is the class's last chance. Any questions? Go ahead and unmute your microphone and ask Jake. We'll give it a few seconds.
While y'all are thinking about your questions, I showed you all the basic search, guided search, touched on the advanced search a little bit, but I wanted to show you also the proximity search, because it's kind of an interesting thing that we're working on. It isn't quite perfect yet, but it's pretty phenomenal in the potential, because we've all run into the situation where someone has records sometimes show just first name and last name, and sometimes they show first, middle, and last, and trying to coordinate all of those different parts is challenging at times. So we've started doing proximity search. So you can search for the specific names, all the different terms you're looking for, and how many words apart they could be. So if you think that, I like the example they use on the side there, chief officer, and it can help find Chief Petty Officer Smith, or whatever the term is. So you can put in a blank word in between multiple phrases, and so it will pull up near each other.
Yeah, the Fulton newspaper, I'm sure you're familiar with the Fulton, New York newspaper website. It's not nearly as polished as this one, obviously. But if you know how to do Boolean searching, it does allow you to do proximity searching as well. Yeah. However, this is much cleaner, obviously, much cleaner. And
it's not perfect yet.
Yeah, well, a great example of a proximity search would be if you're looking for an obit, especially for a woman, where her maiden name is mentioned, next to the husband's name, because as we all know, especially in years gone by, women very frequently weren't named by their first name in their own obit. They were mentioned by their husband's name, like Mrs. John Smith. But however, if Mrs. John Smith's brother was Charles Harris, you could look for that proximity search, for Smith and Harris within a certain amount of words apart from one another. So, it's a little tricky, but it's a wonderful little trick to know.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it looks like the class doesn't have any other questions, Jacob. So I will thank you very much for your time and expertise today, and for sharing it with us here in Nevada and elsewhere. And I will go ahead and stop the recording in just a moment, but I wanted to let all my students know, if you'd like to stay over for at least another hour or so working on family trees, just stay logged in. If not, you can go ahead and log out. And I'll say thank you very much for coming today. And once again, thank you, Jacob. We're getting a lot of a little applause here going on.
Thank you all so much.
I will be sending you the link shortly, probably in another week or two. So if you'd like to share that with your colleagues, you're more than welcome to do so.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I will send you either the presentation itself or a link to the presentation if you would like that as well.
Thank you. And I'll put that in my follow-up email to the students.
Perfect. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.